The unsolved case of three Girl Scouts. What happened in Oklahoma? In June of 1977, Camp Scott in Oklahoma was supposed to be a summer sanctuary, a place where hundreds of young girls were ready to make memories that would last a lifetime. For Lori Farmer, Doris Milner, and Michele Guse, it was their very first night. A night of giggles, new friends, and letters written home by flashlight. But as a thunderstorm rolled in, something terrible descended on the camp. By morning, a discovery on a quiet path would turn this summer dream into a nightmare that has haunted America for decades. Three girls were gone, leaving behind a question that no one has ever truly been able to answer. What happened in tent number 8? Section 1. The Innocent Beginning. The summer of '77 was meant to be magical. For young girls across northeastern Oklahoma, the place to be was Camp Scott, a 410-acre stretch of wilderness in Mays County. Since 1928, this camp had been a beloved tradition run by the Magic Empire Council of Girl Scouts. It was a world carved out of the rugged Cookson Hills, offering everything a kid could want from a summer adventure: boating, hiking, fishing, and crafts. The camp was divided into 10 units, each named after a Native American tribe, with simple canvas tents set on wooden platforms. It felt like a world away from the city, where the only lights at night were from kerosene lanterns and the flashlights of excited campers. On June 12, 1977, buses filled with over 100 girls rumbled down the narrow Cookie Trail, bringing a new batch of campers for a 2-week session. Among them were 3 friends who signed up as camp buddies: 8-year-old Lori Lee Farmer, 9-year-old Michele Guse, and 10-year-old Doris Milner. Lori was a bright, energetic 3rd grader and a straight-A student, so excited to be there that she'd sold enough Girl Scout cookies to pay for her own trip. Michele was known for her sweet personality and was buzzing with excitement for the adventure. Doris, the oldest of the 3, was a girl on the verge of new adventures. They were all assigned to the Kiowa unit in tent number 8. It was the most isolated tent in the entire camp, about 86 yards from the counselor's tent and partially hidden by the camp showers. Another girl was supposed to join them, but her plans changed at the last minute, leaving the 3 friends alone. As evening fell, a massive thunderstorm rolled across the Oklahoma landscape. The girls had dinner, and as the rain poured down, they settled into their tent for the night. They wrote letters to their parents by flashlight, their words full of the simple joy that only the first night of summer camp can bring. Outside, the storm raged, its noise masking the sounds of the wilderness. But as the campers drifted to sleep, something far more sinister was moving through the darkness. Disturbingly, there had been a warning. Less than 2 months earlier, in April, a counselor in training found her tent had been ransacked. Her donuts were stolen, and inside the empty box was a chilling, handwritten note. In all caps, it read, "We are on a mission to kill 3 girls in tent 1. At the time, the camp director dismissed it as a sick prank and the note was thrown away. The murders, however, happened in tent 8. That note was a dark premonition, a whisper of the horror to come, but it was a warning that went unheeded. The stage was set for a tragedy that would shatter the innocence of a generation. Section 2. The Discovery. As the night of June 12th turned into the early morning of June 13th, the relentless thunderstorm provided a perfect cover for unimaginable violence. Around 1:30 a.m., a camp counselor named Carla Wilhite was jolted awake by a strange noise she described as a low, guttural, moaning sound. Peering out into the rain-swept darkness, she saw nothing unusual and figured it was just an animal. She went back to sleep. The full weight of what had happened wouldn't be known until sunrise. Around 6 a.m., as Carla Wilhite walked along the path toward the shower house, she saw something lying on the trail, about 150 yards from the girl's tent. It was a sleeping bag. As she got closer, a horrifying reality began to set in. Inside was the body of one of the young campers. Overwhelmed with fear, she ran to get help, returning with the camp director and the nurse. That was only the beginning. Soon, the bodies of the other two girls were found nearby. The scene was one of absolute horror. Lori, Michele, and Doris had been brutally murdered. Their bodies had been dragged from their tent and left on the trail. They had been sexually assaulted, beaten, and strangled. Autopsies later confirmed that Lori and Michele died from blunt force trauma to the head, while Doris had been strangled. The crime scene told a story of brutal efficiency. Investigators quickly determined the attacks happened inside tent number 8, where the floor was soaked in blood. It looked like the killer had tried to clean up, using towels to wipe away the blood, but the evidence of the slaughter was undeniable. Near the bodies, investigators found several key items. A roll of duct tape, similar to bindings found on one of the girls, a red plastic flashlight, its lens covered with a piece of a garbage bag and tape, with a small pinhole poked through it to create a tiny, focused beam of light, and a footprint from what looked like a size 9.5 shoe, preserved in the mud and blood inside the tent. Within hours, Camp Scott was no longer a summer camp. It was a massive crime scene. The remaining campers were quietly gathered and sent home, their summer cut short by a terrifying event they couldn't possibly understand. News spread like wildfire, first through the small town of Locust Grove and then across the nation. It was every parent's worst nightmare. The Magic Empire Council, which ran the camp, came under fire for its handling of the crisis, allegedly calling its insurance company before all the victims' parents had been notified. For the families of Lori Farmer, Michele Guse, and Doris Milner, their world was shattered, replaced by a lifetime of grief and a search for answers that would span decades. Section 3. The Investigation. The murders at Camp Scott launched one of the largest manhunts in Oklahoma's history. The quiet woods were suddenly swarming with law enforcement. Local police, the Mays County Sheriff's Department, the OSBI, and the FBI. But the investigation faced challenges from the start. The same thunderstorm that had hidden the killer had also washed away potential evidence, turning the crime scene into a muddy mess. Investigators meticulously collected what they could. The key clues were the modified flashlight, the duct tape, and the footprint, but they didn't point to an immediate suspect. Fear gripped the community. The idyllic image of summer camp as a safe place was destroyed, not just in Oklahoma, but everywhere. Just days into the investigation, a tip from 2 local squirrel hunters dramatically shifted the case. They led police to a small cave system in the woods, less than 3 miles from the camp. Inside, investigators found items that seemed to blow the case wide open. There was a roll of tape that matched the tape on the flashlight, newspapers that matched the one stuffed inside the flashlight, and, most importantly, some photographs. Police circulated the photos, hoping someone would recognize the person using the cave as a hideout. The breakthrough came when a prison employee recognized them. They'd been developed as part of a prison work program. This connection led investigators straight to their prime suspect, Gene Leroy Hart. At 33 years old, Hart was well known to Oklahoma law enforcement. He was a convicted kidnapper and rapist with a long, violent criminal history. As a member of the Cherokee Nation, Hart had grown up near Locust Grove and knew the rugged terrain of the Cookson Hills like the back of his hand. His mother's property was only a mile from Camp Scott. Chillingly, in 1966, he had been convicted for the kidnapping and assault of 2 pregnant women, and the methods used, specifically bindings, were eerily similar to the Girl Scout murders. Hart had been sentenced to over 300 years in prison, but in 1973, he escaped from the Mays County Jail and had been on the run ever since. The evidence from the cave seemed to point directly to him. With Hart identified, the investigation became a focused manhunt. But finding him wasn't going to be easy. He was an expert woodsman, and he had relatives in the area, where there was a deep-seated mistrust of law enforcement. For 10 long months, the search went on. Hart became a real-life boogeyman, a monster lurking in the woods. Finally, on April 6, 1978, an OSBI team, acting on a tip, closed in on a small cabin about 50 miles from the camp. There, they arrested Gene Leroy Hart without a struggle. The state's largest manhunt was over. Hart was charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder, and it seemed like justice was finally within reach. But the arrest was just the beginning of a new chapter, one that would lead to a controversial trial and even more questions. Section 4. The Trial of Gene Leroy Hart. The trial of Gene Leroy Hart began in March 1979, and it quickly became one of the most divisive legal battles in Oklahoma history. The prosecution felt they had a strong circumstantial case. They presented the evidence from the cave, the tape and newspaper, and highlighted Hart's violent past and his escapee status. They also had hair samples from the scene that they claimed were consistent with Hart's. However, Hart's defense attorney, a charismatic local lawyer named Garvin Isaacs, masterfully picked the state's case apart. Isaacs argued that Hart was being railroaded, a convenient scapegoat for an investigation that was under immense pressure to find a killer. The defense team suggested evidence may have been planted and that law enforcement had zeroed in on Hart from the very beginning, ignoring other leads. In the courtroom, the prosecution's evidence began to look less certain. The hair analysis was deemed inconclusive. The defense argued the footprint found in the tent didn't match Hart's shoe size. A smudged fingerprint on the flashlight couldn't be positively identified. The state's case hinged on linking Hart to the cave, but the defense raised just enough doubt. The trial also exposed a deep rift in the community. Many members of the Cherokee Nation rallied behind Hart, raising money for his defense and believing he was a victim of racial prejudice. Hart himself maintained his innocence from the moment he was arrested. After days of dramatic testimony, the case went to the jury. The families of Lori, Michele, and Doris waited, desperate for justice. But on March 20th, 1979, the jury returned with a stunning decision: not guilty on all counts. The courtroom erupted. The families were devastated. Lori Farmer's mother, Sherry, recalled the profound shock, a feeling that justice had been stolen. Jurors later said that while they didn't necessarily think Hart was innocent, the prosecution simply hadn't proven its case beyond a reasonable doubt. Though acquitted of the murders, Hart wasn't a free man. He was sent back to prison to continue serving his 300-year sentence for his prior convictions. But the story had one last, tragic twist. Just 2 months later, on June 4, 1979, Gene Leroy Hart collapsed and died of a massive heart attack in the prison yard. He was 35 years old. His death meant he could never be retried, even if new evidence surfaced. For many, it seemed the full truth of what happened in tent number 8 was buried with him. The case was officially unsolved. Section 5. The Unresolved Aftermath. In the decades since the trial, the Oklahoma Girl Scout murders have remained a raw, open wound. The case is officially cold, but for the families of the victims, time has not brought peace. The word closure is one many of them reject. As Betty Milner, Doris's mother, once said, "There is no closure." I don't know who made up that word. It's a journey. And for these families, it has been a journey of unimaginable pain. The murders sent a wave of fear across the country, shattering the sense of safety that had once been synonymous with summer camp. Camp Scott was shut down immediately and never reopened. The land eventually became an eerie, silent monument to the tragedy. The Girl Scout Council changed its protocols forever, building future camps with enhanced security, a stark admission that the world had changed. The story has become a dark piece of Oklahoma folklore, passed down through generations. It's been the subject of numerous books and documentaries, including the 2022 Hulu series Keeper of the Ashes. That series was hosted by actress and singer Kristen Chenoweth, who has a deeply personal connection to the case. As a little girl, she was supposed to be at Camp Scott on that very trip, but got sick and had to stay home. She has spoken about the lasting trauma the murders inflicted on her and her community, stating, "This happened. There's no closure. There's no pretty red bow at the end." For the families, the years have been about finding a way to live with the unthinkable. Sherry and Bo Farmer, Lori's parents, channeled their grief into founding the Oklahoma chapter of Parents of Murdered Children and have worked tirelessly for victims' rights. As Sherry Farmer has said, "I'm hoping to motivate other people to care, even though they haven't had a murdered child." But beneath all the advocacy, the central question always remained: who did it? While the jury acquitted Hart, many investigators and the families themselves never wavered in their belief that he was the killer. That belief would eventually lead to a renewed push for answers, this time through the power of science. Section 6. Modern Developments and DNA. For years, the physical evidence from 1977 sat in storage. The original investigation was limited by the technology of the time, but as science advanced, so did the hope that this cold case might finally be solved. The first attempt came in 1989, when the FBI performed an early form of DNA testing on a semen stain found on a pillowcase from one of the sleeping bags. The results were officially inconclusive. However, they did reveal a partial profile that could be found in about 1 out of every 7,700 Native American men, a group that, of course, included Hart. In 2008, another round of testing was attempted, but the samples were too degraded. The case seemed to have hit another dead end. But the families, particularly Lori Farmer's parents, never gave up. In 2015, they approached the new Mays County Sheriff, Mike Reed, who had grown up in the area and was just a boy when the murders happened. He agreed to take a fresh look at the case. Sheriff Reed raised $30,000 in private donations to fund a new round of DNA testing with the most advanced methods available. After 3 years of waiting, the results were made public in 2022. They were stunning. While the degraded samples couldn't produce a full DNA profile, the kind needed for a legal conviction, the science was powerful. DNA testing on stains from a pillowcase was consistent with Hart's DNA profile. The results strongly suggested that Gene Leroy Hart was the source. Furthermore, the testing definitively excluded other main suspects who had been considered over the years. For Sheriff Mike Reed, this was confirmation. He stated publicly, "Unless something new comes up, I am convinced where I'm sitting of Hart's guilt and involvement in this case." He made it clear that while the case remains officially open, he believes the evidence points to a single killer. For the families, the DNA results provided a form of resolution, if not legal closure. Lori Farmer's father, Bo, said the information solidified his long-held belief that Hart was the man who killed his daughter. The scientific evidence brought a sense of peace, confirming that the investigation had been on the right track all along. Yet, because Hart was acquitted and is now deceased, there will never be a final day in court. Justice, in its purest legal form, remains out of reach. The case of the Oklahoma Girl Scout murders is a story of profound loss, shattered innocence, and an enduring mystery. It's the story of 3 little girls, Lori Lee Farmer, Michele Heather Guse, and Doris Denise Milner, whose lives were stolen in the most brutal way imaginable. The investigation that followed led to a prime suspect, a dramatic trial, and a verdict that left everyone with more questions than answers. Gene Leroy Hart, the man at the center of the storm, took his secrets to the grave. Today, thanks to the relentless persistence of the victims' families and the power of modern science, we are closer to the truth than ever. The latest DNA evidence provides a powerful, if not legally definitive, answer, strongly suggesting that the man acquitted by a jury was, in fact, the killer. It has brought a measure of peace to the families who have lived with uncertainty for so long. But there is no final chapter. The case remains officially open, with no conviction and no legal closure. What remains is the memory of three bright, hopeful young lives cut short, and the unwavering love of the families who have ensured they are never forgotten. Their journey is a testament to the relentless pursuit of truth, even in the face of the darkest of tragedies. Thank you for joining us for this look into the Oklahoma Girl Scout murders. This case is a powerful reminder of the importance of memory and the long, difficult quest for answers. What are your thoughts on this case? Do you believe the DNA results finally solved the mystery? Let us know in the comments below. If you found this story informative, please give it a like and subscribe for more true crime investigations. Your support helps us continue to tell these important stories.